and welcome back to the Real Life Theology Podcast. This is your host, Matthew Croson. Today's episode will help us understand the importance of mentorship, teamwork, and planting Hispanic churches, while exploring biblical examples and practical strategies to overcome unique challenges in these communities. Let's get into it.
Hey guys, welcome to the workshop time, the breakout time in the afternoon. My name is John Bliffen, and I'm the director of Latino Christian Movement based out of Memphis, Tennessee. I've been a missionary for 38 years among Hispanic countries and peoples, different places. And this workshop we're going to do bilingual because our mission is mostly involved in starting Hispanic churches or Latino churches, and we have several people here who are Spanish speaking. But also we want to share the insights in English as well about mentoring and networks. That it's kind of the way that we do ministry. So we want to share that with you all as well. Este taller va a ser bilingüe. Vamos a compartir en inglés y en español. Or do any of you speak both languages?
I speak Portuguese, so I can understand most of it.
Portuguese, okay. So Portuguese. We used to get a lot of Portuguese when we would go to Uruguay. We'd be on the plane from Varig. Like Varig, do you remember that airline? It's a great airline. Too bad they went south or whatever. But no, they would have everything in English and Spanish and Portuguese. So we picked up a little bit of Portuguese there. Glad to have it. I lived for 2 years in Spain. Viví por 2 años en España también. And in Spain they have a great custom. That is the siesta, right after lunch. So I know this is a hard time to have a class, right? So because we're kind of in that mode of being tired and ready for a nap, but no naps allowed here. Como fui misionero también en España, pues dimos la costumbre de la siesta, que era muy rico, siempre me gustaba, pero aquí no se puede porque estamos en la clase, tenemos que mantenernos despiertos. So I want to look first of all at some Bible examples of teamwork and mentoring. Recently I've been teaching a class on Romans, and we're down to the last chapter of Romans. So by the time you get to Romans chapter 16, you've been through a lot of heavy doctrinal things, and you're finally ready to, okay, here we are at the end. And oftentimes we kind of want to gloss over chapter 16 and say, oh, this is just a bunch of greetings. But there's some key thoughts, I think, in this chapter that just help us understand the relationships that Paul had with the people that he was working with. Hemos estado enseñando últimamente en el libro de Romanos, y nosotros en los primeros capítulos de Romanos siempre hay mucha doctrina, muchas cosas muy interesantes, y llegamos aquí al final del capítulo 15, empezando Romanos 16, y pensamos, si pudiéramos saltar esta parte porque son solamente saludos, pero realmente creo que hay cosas buenas aquí en este capítulo también. So let's look at Romans chapter 16. If you've never been in a bilingual workshop before, we go back and forth. We'll go from English and Spanish and back and forth. So if you know both languages, it might sound like an echo, but it works okay.
Where are we moving now?
Romans chapter 16, verses 1 through 5. So obviously this is Paul as he is closing out Romans. He's closing out this letter, and he says, I'll read it in English, and then Arturo, si puedes leerlo en español después. Busca Romanos 16. So Romans 16, 1 through 5 says, I commend to you our sister Phoebe as a deaconess of the church in Cenchrea, and I ask you to receive her in the Lord in the way worthy of his people, and to give her any help she may need from you. For she has been a benefactor of many people, including me. Greet Priscilla and Aquila, my co-workers in Christ Jesus. They risked their lives for me. Not only I, but all the churches of the Gentiles are grateful to them. Greet also the church that meets in their house. Hermano, en español.
Os recomiendo además nuestra hermana Febe, la cual es diaconisa de la iglesia en Cencrea, que la recibáis en el Señor como es digno de los santos y que la ayudéis en cualquier cosa que necesite de vosotros, porque ella ha ayudado a muchos y a mí mismo. Saludos a Priscilla y a Aquila, mis colaboradores en Cristo Jesús, que expusieron su vida por mí, a los cuales no solo yo doy gracias, sino también todas las iglesias de los gentiles. Saludad también a la iglesia de su casa, saludad a Epeneto, amado mío, que es primer fruto de Acaya para Cristo.
Right, so we see here that Paul has a relationship with several people. And if you look all the way through chapter 16 of Romans, you're going to see these different people that he had relationships with. Now, he had never been to Rome, but still he knew lots of people who lived in Rome. Phoebe, we believe, was probably the person who took the letter of Romans to Rome and gave it to the people there. But then Priscilla and Aquila, this is a couple that worked with Paul and became co-workers with him in many different ways. And we want to look also just at the Bible record of what they did and how they worked together with Paul. So we're going to go to Acts chapter 18 and read that as well. We're going to go to Acts chapter 18, verses 1 through 5. And this is where we first meet Priscilla and Aquila. It says, after this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker, as they were, he stayed and worked with them every Sabbath. He reasoned in the synagogue, trying to persuade Jews and Greeks. When Silas and Timothy came from Macedonia, Paul devoted himself exclusively to preaching, testifying to the Jews that Jesus was the Messiah. Arturo, si puedes leerlo en español.
Después de estas cosas, Pablo salió de Atenas y fue a Corinto y halló un judío llamado Aquila, natural del Ponto, recién venido de Italia, con Priscilla su mujer. Por cuanto Claudio había mandado que todos los judíos saliesen de Roma, fue a ellos y como era del mismo oficio se quedó con ellos y trabajando juntos, pues el oficio de ella era hacer tiendas y discutía en las sinagogas todos los días de reposo y persuadía a judíos y a griegos. Y cuando salió Silas y Timoteo vinieron a Macedonia, Pablo estaba entregado por entero en la predicación de la palabra, testificando a los judíos que Jesús era el Cristo.
Right, so we have here a relationship that Paul begins with this couple, Priscilla and Aquila. Right, they actually had come from Rome, they were living in Rome, and they were already Christians. Now, an interesting thing about Paul's letter to the Romans, his letters to all the other churches, he had started those churches, right? But when he writes to Romans, had he started that church? No, he had never been to Rome yet. So how did that church get started?
People he had reached, or they had taken the message there from where he had been.
Okay, very possible they had taken the message from where he had been. Also, if you remember from Acts chapter 2, the day of Pentecost, there were people there in Jerusalem from where? From all over the area, including Rome. So it's very likely that there were Christians or there were people there in Rome who heard the very first gospel message, were converted to Christianity on the day of Pentecost, and then moved back to Rome. Many of the Jews made that pilgrimage for the special feast, right? Feast of Pentecost being one of those, Passover another. So it's possible, we don't know, but some people, some Jews may have been in Jerusalem. We know that there were some there from Rome because the Bible says that in Acts chapter 2:10. And so it's very possible they went back to Rome and started churches. Now, it's interesting what Paul says about them. In Romans, he says that he wants to greet them and the church that meets in their house. Right? So we know that they're Christians and they have a church meeting in their house. Interesante esta relación que Pablo tiene con Priscilla y Aquila. Ellos son dos personas que realmente son importantes en el libro de Hechos porque son personas que llevan con ellos la palabra de Dios y una relación muy especial con Pablo. Llegan a ser como personas que él los entrena en el Evangelio, después ellos llevan adelante el mensaje cristiano. So, Priscilla and Aquila were already Christians at this time. They come and they meet Paul, and it says that they have the same job or career that Paul has. And what is that? And that's where we get the idea of tent-making ministries, right? Tent-making ministry is someone that is bivocational, someone that has a job, has a career, or has a craft that they are doing, and they earn their money from that job, but they're also sharing the gospel. And this was Priscilla and Aquila and Paul also. It says that they were all working in this area of tent making. Entonces podemos entender aquí que Priscilla y Aquila, los dos estaban haciendo lo mismo que Pablo. Estaban haciendo tiendas y a la vez de eso estaban predicando el evangelio, estaban predicando y compartiendo el evangelio con los demás. Entonces compartían con Pablo de ambas formas. So we would say that they shared Paul's craft of making tents, but they also shared his passion for preaching the gospel. So we're looking at mentoring, right? Bible examples of teamwork and mentoring. Apostle Paul was always involved in mentoring people. That's why when you look at 16th chapter of Romans, you're going to find all of these people that somehow he had connection with, and he sends greetings back to them. But this couple, Priscilla and Aquila, very special to Paul because they shared his same trade, they shared his same job, they shared the ideas of preaching the gospel as well. Entonces vemos que Pablo está mentoreando a Priscilla y Aquila. Y Pablo siempre hacía eso, siempre tenía gente con él, estaba ayudando a personas a ir a otros lugares, estaba dejándolos allí. Entonces, él estaba mentoreando a ellos y ellos seguían su ejemplo. Now let's also read the last part of Acts chapter 18, verses 18 to 26. And we're going to find that Paul, not only was he mentoring Priscilla and Aquila, but also he helped them or sent them to mentor others as well, right? Vamos a mirar también a Hechos capítulo 18, versos 18 a 26 para ver el resto de la historia. So I'll read it in English first, and then if one of the brothers can read it in Spanish as well. Paul stayed on in Corinth for some time. Then he left the brothers and sisters and sailed for Syria, accompanied by Priscilla and Aquila. Before he sailed, he had his hair cut off at Cenchrea because of a vow he had taken. They arrived at Ephesus, where Paul left Priscilla and Aquila. He himself went into the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. And when they asked him to spend some more time with them, he declined. But as he left, he promised, "I'll come back if it is God's will." Then he set sail from Ephesus. When he landed at Caesarea, he went up to Jerusalem and greeted the church, and then went down to Antioch. After spending some time in Antioch, Paul set out from there and traveled from place to place throughout the region of Galatia and Phrygia, strengthening all the disciples. Meanwhile, remember, Paul had left Aquila and Priscilla in that place. Meanwhile, a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was a learned man with a thorough knowledge of the Scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervor and taught about Jesus accurately, though he knew only the baptism of John. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue. When Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they invited him to their home and explained to him the way of God more accurately. Right, so we have, first of all, Paul getting to know Priscilla and Aquila, Paul teaching them, mentoring them, and then he leaves them in Ephesus so that they can teach others. And they find this man Apollos, and Apollos he's a learned man, he knows about Jesus, but he doesn't know about Christian baptism. He only knows about the baptism that John the Baptist did. So they teach him the way of God more correctly. So we have this, we could say this chain of Paul teaching Priscilla and Aquila, mentoring them, and then Priscilla and Aquila mentoring Apollos. And we see one to another, right? Vamos a leer también en español, capítulo 18, de 18 a 26. Sí, hermano Arturo, capítulo 18, de 18 a 26.
¿14 de 18?
Hechos 18, de 18 a 26.
Mas Pablo, viéndose detenido aún muchos días allí, después se despidió de los hermanos y navegó a Siria y con él Priscilla y Aquila, y habiéndose rapado la cabeza en Cencrea, porque tenía hecho voto, y llegó a Éfeso y los dejó allí, y entrando en la sinagoga discutía con los judíos, los cuales le rogaban que se quedase con ellos más tiempo, mas no accedió, sino que se despidió de ellos diciendo: es necesario que en todo caso yo guarde, que lo celebren, la fiesta que viene pero otra vez volveré a vosotros si Dios quiere, y zarpó a Éfeso. Habiendo arribado a Cesarea, subió para saludar a la iglesia y luego descendió a Antioquía, y después de estar allí algún tiempo salió recorriendo por orden la región de Galacia y de Frigia, confirmando a todos los discípulos. Llegó entonces a Éfeso un judío llamado Apolos, natural de Alejandría, varón elocuente, poderoso en las Escrituras. Este había sido instruido en el camino del Señor, y siendo del espíritu fervoroso, hablaba y enseñaba diligentemente lo concerniente al Señor, aunque solamente conocía el bautismo de Juan. Y comenzó a hablar con denuedo en la sinagoga, pero cuando lo oyeron Priscila y Aquila, le tomaron aparte y le expusieron más exactamente el camino de Dios. Y queriendo él pasar a acá, y a los hermanos le animaron, y escribieron a los discípulos que le recibiesen, y llegado el día, llegado él allá, fue de gran provecho a los que por gracia habían creído, porque con gran vehemencia refutaba públicamente a los judíos, demostrando por las Escrituras que Jesús era el Cristo.
Bien, así lo que tenemos con Pablo, Priscila y Aquila es que Pablo primeramente comienza una relación con ellos, él los entrena, él está mentoreando a ellos y después deja a ellos en un lugar para que ellos hagan el trabajo del evangelismo, y ellos encuentran a Apolos, lo mentorean a él y lo enseñan a él. Lo que estamos viendo es una cadena de discipulado, de mentorería, y lo que nosotros llamamos en inglés un network, una red de amistades. So as Paul did with Priscilla and Aquila, he also did with many others throughout his ministry. He was always taking someone with him, training them, leaving them in some place, and then writing letters, right? So that was the first century networking. Paul was mentoring and networking through taking people with him, discipling, evangelizing, and then writing letters back to them and going back and visiting them. That was his way that was the first century way of networking. Entonces eso es como se hacía la red en el Nuevo Testamento, ¿verdad? Él llevaba gente con él, los entrenaba, estaba mentoreando y después los dejaba en un lugar y después escribía cartas y de esa forma estaba creando una red de entrenamiento. So we can also see in Romans 16, the last part of that chapter, you're going to see a mention of Timothy. And he just says very quickly, he says, Timothy sends you greetings, right? In Romans chapter 16, verse 21. Timothy, my co-worker, sends his greetings, as do Lucius, Jason, and Sosipater, my fellow Jews, right? So not only do we have greetings, Paul greeting people in Rome, but also the people who were with him in Corinth as he's writing the letter of Romans are sending greetings to the Roman people. One of those is Timothy. Now, of course, Timothy is a well-known companion of Paul. He met Timothy in Lystra. We find that story in Acts chapter 16, that Paul met Timothy and he trained him and he took Timothy with him on his journeys, right? So this is another part of Paul's networking. He's always taking someone with him on his trips so that he could show Timothy, in this case, how to evangelize, how to disciple. He was training him, mentoring him, taking him along with him, and then he left Timothy in a certain place. And then we get to the scripture in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, which is kind of a principle that Paul had and he was using in all of his journeys, in all of his work, this principle, 2 Timothy 2:2. This is really a life verse for me. It is something that has been helpful for me in my ministry. One of the main things that I do is to train people and to help to place them in parts of ministry and places of ministry for service. 2 Timothy 2:2. And the things that you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. Hermano, ¿puede leer 2 Timoteo 2:2?
Lo que has oído de mí ante muchos testigos, esto encargo a hombres fieles que sean idóneos para enseñar también a otros.
Entonces tenemos también lo mismo que está pasando con Aquila y Priscilla. Tenemos a Timoteo. Pablo lo enseñó a él. Timoteo acompañó a Pablo y después Pablo lo dejó como un pastor en un lugar específico. Y esta escritura me encanta. Las cosas que has oído de mí en presencia de muchos testigos. Encárgase a gente, ¿cómo dice ahí? ¿Qué tipo de gente?
Hombres fieles.
Hombres fieles. Encárgalos a hombres fieles que sean idóneos para enseñar a otros también. Es una cadena de discipulado, de mentoreo. So we're going to see this chain of discipleship and of mentoring, right? He says, the things you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses. So in other words, Paul is always surrounded by people. We never see Paul in a Lone Ranger type ministry. He's out there doing his own thing. He's always got people with him in the presence of many witnesses. So Timothy was not only hearing the word of God from Paul, but he was hearing Paul teach others, and Timothy's in the presence of many witnesses hearing all these things. This is a part of mentoring, a part of networking. So this is our biblical example for what we do in our ministry. Este es el ejemplo bíblico por lo que nosotros hacemos en nuestro ministerio. Siempre nosotros queremos entrenar a otros hombres jóvenes y entrenarlos y ponerlos en la obra del Señor. So, I want to share with you just a little bit about our ministry and then some specifics about regional networks that we're working with And there's also networks involved in the renew.org movement. And we're just going to talk a little bit about the importance of those networks. So our ministry, Latino Christian Movement, has a purpose of providing the resources and partnerships to help start new Hispanic Christian churches in several states. And right now we're working in Arkansas, Florida, Nebraska, Colorado, Mississippi, Indiana, and Illinois. And our vision is to start 10 networks of Hispanic churches in 10 different regions in the next 10 years. And the way that we plan to do that is through having regional mentors to help develop these churches and the partnerships that they need to do to reach the Hispanic community. Nosotros estamos en nuestro ministerio tratando de, el propósito es proveer recursos y asociaciones para plantar iglesias hispanas en muchos diferentes estados. En el estado de Arkansas, Florida, Nebraska, Colorado, Mississippi, estamos trabajando ahora. Y nuestra visión es tener 10 de estos redes de trabajo en los próximos 10 años. Y la manera que lo vamos a hacer es a través de mentoreo regional. Y entonces quería solamente compartir estas ideas con ustedes, también para que lo vean. Nosotros estamos haciendo en estos movimientos. The networks that we are working in right now are located in these regions. In the Mid-South region, we have the Arkansas, Tennessee, and Mississippi states. In the Plains region, we're working in Colorado, Nebraska, and Kansas. In the Southeast region, Florida and Georgia. So here's our man from Miami here. In the Midwest region, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri. So the importance of these types of gatherings that we're having here with Renew also is for encouragement and for fellowship and to realize that we are not alone. So one of the main things that we do in our network is that we have a Zoom call where we have all the people from the network join on that call, and it's once a month. And the idea is just to share some kind of a teaching, to share encouragement, to share prayer requests, and to pray one for another. And thank God now that we don't have to rely on written letters on parchments to encourage one another, right? Now we have all kinds of ways that we can encourage one another. We have Zoom calls, we have WhatsApp groups. And really instantly we can share a prayer request with somebody and know that we're not alone. This is really the importance of networks, is to be encouraged and realize that we're not alone. Nosotros estamos trabajando ahora en estos redes porque la importancia es compartir la palabra de Dios y compartir el mensaje y saber que no estamos solos. El problema es que muchas veces en la plantación de iglesias hispanas la gente está muy aislada, está muy separados y se piensa que solamente están en un lugar a solas trabajando y no saben que hay otros que están pasando lo mismo. Entonces es muy importante para nosotros estar juntos y saber que a través de una red podemos realmente animarnos unos a otros, a través de una llamada, a través de compartir peticiones de oración y a través de ver las necesidades los unos a los otros. So this is kind of what we're doing with Latino Christian Movement. I'm curious to see if any of y'all are involved in any kind of a network, a regional network of church planters or of churches that you're actually involved in. And could you share a little bit of an example of what you do in a network setting? Are any of you involved in that? Are you looking to be involved in that? Yes.
Ministry at League is called Mr. Global. I have a shirt on today. We partner with local churches right now in 12 nations, four continents. And what we do is provide equipping resources with them. So we partner with them, provide resources in their language. We're actually happen to be, I didn't even realize this was the Latino network.
It's all right.
It was good. We're actually growing really rapidly in Latin America. So I work directly with pastors or even bishops and so forth, and we have regional representatives. But we are not a church. We're a paraclete ministry, as someone
Right,
said
like a
recently.
parachurch ministry, yeah.
Not a parachurch, a paraclete
ministry.
comes alongside the church. So we don't actually do anything ourselves. We do it with and through the church. And we have church-based schools of ministry as our main resources as we help churches establish a church-based, leadership-led, in their language, school of ministry in their church so they can equip their people to do the work of ministry and to even train and send leaders. So we are with the end goal of church planting as well, an element of church planting. So how does that work for us is I have a network of national representatives who are nationals of those countries. They are leaders, church leaders, but the churches that we work with, it's interesting. So there's a dynamic that's very different because we are not a church covering. We work only with and through local churches, which has its own unique aspects. And I could go into a lot of stories on how we have to develop those relationships into those different regions.
Thanks for sharing. Appreciate the network so it's a global network. We're not talking about just something in one area, but a global network. So there are lots of different types of networks out there. Él está hablando de una red global con iglesias, un ministerio que va...
It's trans-denominational, so it's not a denomination.
Claro, que trabaja con muchas diferentes iglesias. Are any of you involved in a local network? Let's say like a network of churches in a certain area through Renew or through another type of organization? Nope. Okay. I think we need to start some more networks then. What would be involved? I'll just tell you what we do with our network. Part of what we do is training. So we have 3 days of training every year where we bring our church planters and our preachers in to receive training on several different areas of church planting. And then we have the regional mentors to help them go over those things that they've learned in the training. And what we find out is that people, once they go through training, they learn some certain things, but then they forget it until they have to start putting it into practice. And they need someone to come alongside of them, like you were talking about. So a network person can come alongside of them and help them to remember the things and put them into practice. Entonces,
We allowed to ask a question?
yes.
So is your network, how does it work as far as, I'll just be direct, how does it work as far as denominations? Are they like generally independent churches? Are you like a network of churches officially, or is it more like relational or both?
So our network is specifically for Christian churches, independent Christian churches. So it's not a multi-denominational. It's just for Christian churches, and specifically for Hispanic Christian churches. So
they tend to be
very very directed.
independent churches.
Independent churches, yeah. Independent Christian churches, right? So we already share a doctrinal basis, right? We already share the language that we're working in. We are helping to provide the materials and the resources that they need in order to help their church grow. Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to share with you all some of the challenges that we have with our Hispanic church planting movement. As it's not. There are a lot of specific things that are different about what we do. Vamos a compartir algunos de los desafíos que tenemos en la plantación de iglesias hispanas. So, part of the challenge for Hispanic church planting are finances. We have to do a lot of fundraising for the churches. When you plant a church in an American or English-speaking Anglo church, the expectation is that within 2 to 3 years, the church can become self-supporting. Well, in Hispanic church planting, that is not viable. It's really not that easy to become self-supported in 2 or 3 years. We teach tithing to our Hispanic churches, but we realize that their culture of giving is different. And so fundraising is necessary for the Hispanic church planter even longer than an Anglo church plant. So if in an Anglo church plant, if you're looking 2 to 3 years, with a Hispanic church, we're probably looking 3 to 5 years to get to a point of basic sustainability, but still some kind of help coming in to help the churches to continue to function. The Hispanic churches also need to realize that part of what they need to do is to fund new church planting. And recently, some of our Hispanic church planters have been hired by the sponsoring church, and they are called the Latino pastor. And this is a good thing for them to be able to get to realize that their funding is covered, and now they are free to do their evangelistic work. Estamos hablando de la necesidad o el desafío de las finanzas en la iglesia hispana. Nosotros siempre debemos de enseñar a las personas a diezmar, aunque realizamos o entendemos que donar es diferente entre los hispanos, pero siempre es importante. Siempre tiene que seguir haciendo levantamiento de fondos, porque es necesario quizás un tiempo más largo para una iglesia necesitar fondos de otras fuentes. Las iglesias hispanas también necesitan donar dinero a otras plantaciones de iglesias. Estamos muy contentos cuando una iglesia puede ayudar a fundar otra iglesia. One of the things that was been very helpful and very exciting for us in our movement is that the first church that we planted, Comunidad Cristiana in Little Rock, was also able to help at the planting of other churches in the state of Little Rock. And so it's always exciting when a church is involved in planting other churches. That gives them vision as far as what the future is, and gives them vision as what they can do as a church. Una parte de lo que hemos estado muy contentos es que cuando una iglesia puede ayudar a plantar otra iglesia. Another challenge that we have in our Hispanic church planting is that the Hispanic culture is not from one particular culture. When you talk about Hispanic culture, there are several different countries involved. So we can't think of our Hispanic culture as just one different culture. You know, it's really a mixture of many different cultures in one. So like, for example, here we have people from Mexico and from Peru and from Cuba in our network. And so they all have different cultural backgrounds that they're bringing to the table. And so we have to value unity and diversity. Unity and diversity is a very important value of what we have in our movement. Realizing that the gospel needs to be preached in a culturally appropriate way. We celebrate the differences of culture, but also try to unite people in Jesus Christ. Entonces, la cultura hispana es muy diferente, muy multicultural. No es solamente una sola cultura, sino que viene de muchos diferentes países. También reconocemos que uno de los desafíos es que la iglesia hispana debe ser bilingüe y multigeneracional. We're finding that one of the challenges for Hispanic church planting also is that we're trying to be bilingual and multi-generational. Typically, we target families with children who are newcomers to the United States, and the main language is Spanish, but we do a lot of our children's ministry and youth programs bilingual, and we want to help the people to learn English. We provide help in learning English and getting acclimated to the United States. One of the things that we're hoping to do in the future, short-term future, is to have camps and retreats for youth that will probably be mostly in the English language, but Hispanic culture. And of course, we are also partnering with local Anglo congregations. Uno de los desafíos más grandes es esa necesidad de ser bilingüe y multigeneracional. Nosotros siempre enfocamos en familias que tienen hijos y ayudamos a esa transición, ayudamos a que puedan aprender el idioma. En el futuro muy cercano queremos tener también campamentos y retiros para jóvenes. Y siempre es bueno tener una relación con una iglesia anglo, donde mientras los niños vayan creciendo, quizás se queden en una iglesia que entiende que hay un ministerio hispano, pero también hay una iglesia americana. So oftentimes the best part is just to have some kind of a working relationship with a partnering church, with a sponsoring church that has a full program. And so as the kids grow up and they're learning English, they can transition very smoothly to the local church that they're involved in. For example, in Little Rock and in Rogers, you guys have the great blessing of having a sponsoring church that's right there in the same. You're using the same building. You're sharing the building, so it's very easily and can be seamlessly brought over and adapted to the American church as something that, because as the kids grow up, they're going to prefer English. They're going to be speaking more English. Hopefully, they'll continue their Spanish as well, so that they can reach out to others. But there's an opportunity for them to continue in the same church or a sponsoring church that's right there in the same building. So those are things that we wanted to share with you today. Realize that some of you may have not understood that this was about Hispanic church planting, but that's fine. We're glad to have anybody share these concepts with you, and I hope it's been a blessing for you. Does anyone have any questions that you would like to have about this topic today?
I was going to ask you if there's how many congregations tend to share buildings with, particularly even if they're not a sponsored church financially. Do you find are there a decent number of churches that English-speaking churches have kind of opened up their facility this year?
Yes, we have found. Well, we're working right now currently with.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah,
sure.
How many? The question is how many like English-speaking churches have been willing to open up their facilities for Spanish-speaking churches, and we're currently working with I think 10 of those churches who have opened up their facilities for Spanish-speaking ministry. So, and some more others have contacted us for possibilities. So yeah, it's happening more frequently now. Yeah. Any other questions?
I want to share something.
Okay.
I just recently moved from Houston. I lived there for 30 years, and I just moved to Norwest, Arkansas. They present me a plan to move over to Norwest, Arkansas to plant a church. So for me, it was a big challenge. I lived most of my life in Texas, and I was raised in the border of Mexico, Eagle Pass, Piedras Negras. So I always heard about a lot of missionaries going over to raise a church and help building a church and doing all that kind of stuff. So when I came to the United States, I'm like, well, everything is going to our countries and different countries, but I don't see anything happening in the United States. And that was kind of awkward for me. Like I was always kind of wondering why there's help outside the United States, but there's no help for the Hispanic community inside the United States. And that's where all the resources, most of them come from. And that was kind of intrigue for me. So when I came here, I moved to Arkansas, and it was a struggle for me at first. Right now, I'm in a church where they opened their building, and we have a place that we can call home. But before that, I was struggling because I'm like, I'm coming to ICOM, I'm coming to all these other conferences, but I don't hear and I don't see anybody saying something. Hey, what can we do with the Hispanic community? Church that I go to, my brother goes to Little Rock. We have people from all over the world from the Hispanic community, Venezuela, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. We got people from Guatemala. We got people from all over. So trying to find a place, that was my concern at first. Like, where can I started doing church in my house. That's what I was doing church. I started bringing the community to my house. We got about maybe 20, 30 people coming to my house within the first 2-3 months. But my concern was like, I cannot keep bringing people to my house. I don't know who they are. They're looking for Jesus, but it gets to a point where they already know that it's just my wife and my daughter at home, and when I leave the house, they know everything inside my house. So it's always a concern. So it's kind of I like this, what Latino is doing right now, trying to find people and resources for that, because whether we like it or not, every day there's a lot of people coming into the United States, either they're legal or illegal, they're coming in here. And the need for the Latino, the need for the missions that we do outside the United States, it's already something that is happening in here in the United States. So my question is, what can organizations like this, ICOM, and all these other people that get together, what can we do for that to happen here? Like, okay, if there's no church that wants to provide a building, what can we do to help a pastor or somebody to start a church and to get something started as a church planter? So that would be my question. What are we doing, or what can we do with everybody together?
Okay.
Start a mission within the United States.
So yeah, that's what we're doing with the Latino Christian movement, and maybe there's others that are doing the same as well. And so the question that Arturo says is, what more can we do to help Hispanic churches get started? Because it's a great example and a great opportunity, because we have people coming in the United States from all over the world all the time. David?
So I'm Latino Christian movement's first Hispanic church planting. I'm a second generation Hispanic pastor. My dad's a pastor. He started one of the first Christian churches in Houston. It's been open for more than 20-some years. When he reached out to me in Spain, we opened a shelter for people who seek asylum in the border. Me and my wife, and I was pastoring a church at the age of 25. Started pastoring a church after college. So I was brought over here, and he's like, let's plant churches in Arkansas. There's a big community of Hispanic people getting there. I'm very intentional in what I do. So when we got there, the first thing I did is I met with the police chief and the human resources people and all that, and they're like, we're getting about 100 to 200 Hispanic people every week here in Little Rock. And there is close to about 10 churches of different denominations. I think we need more of y'all here, especially second generation, bilingual. So as we started Christian community, Comunidad Cristiana, we saw the need. It was so big. But one of the nicest things that we got there, which is, it was, I don't think my brother is the one who spoke right now. I'm the one who brought him, John is, but I'm the one who said, hey, come plant churches with us, we need you over here. And the reason behind that was that we're seeing the need for bilingual pastors more and more, but we're also seeing the need for American churches to step up and say, I know we want to go to the missions, and it sounds awesome to put it in our bulletin board that we're going to Cuba, Guatemala, Honduras, but you have them in your backyard already.
They're coming.
They're there.
Mission fields coming to us.
Yeah, just the ones that you can count. It's around 50-something million in the United States. Just in Little Rock, we're close to around 100 and some thousand that they can count. We don't like to be counted, so you have to multiply by 2. But that's it's funny, but that's the reality. We're seeing a lot of. So what's the problem within the Hispanic community? You want to go to all these places which sound great, but Guatemala's already coming here. Honduras is already here. Now we're having people from Venezuela and Cuba here. Just in our church, we're around 120 just in 3 years. And the reason is because we see a lot of people getting there that are from every nation and tongue, literally. So we have different beliefs, different systems, different everything. So discipling is not something very strong in our Hispanic background because we're taught that the pastor is the almighty, guy. So we're trying to change that. That's why we're renew and that's why Latino Christian movement started. But how can the American church help? Obviously, it's opening the doors for us to realize that we're here and that y'all can invest here instead of, obviously you want to go to Guatemala and all that. But the need is here already. So the biggest impact that I had with the church that we're in November, they stepped up to the plate and said, hey, we're seeing what you're doing. Can we absorb everything you are, but still you remain your identity, your vision, and let us just help you. And I said, awesome. That sounds great. Yeah.
Is it so, because like you just said, counting numbers is hard because not everybody wants to be counted. Do you think that kind of plays into, like, we have in Anderson, Indiana, we have another ministry that we're part of, and we're looking at renting out, it's like an old-timey, like, pews church to a Hispanic community, but, like, and this is probably a naive way of saying it, but I didn't even know that was a need until that meeting was had. So, like, are there people going to these churches and these communities and, like, putting that in front of the church? Because I feel like that's something that if more churches knew that it was a problem, immediately, I can't speak for every church, but I'm sure we would be accommodated, like so many other churches would probably be willing if they knew it was a
I think
present issue.
one of the issues that I see that our Hispanic communities live it, see it, talk about it is the Hispanic people, we believe, because I was of this thinking, we are second-class citizens here in the United States. And that's the reality of everything. You know what I'm saying? It's sad to say that I'm a U.S. citizen, but it sounds to say that we are second-class citizens. For example, just here today, coming to worship with y'all, there's still a part of me that feels second-class worship time with y'all. Because that's where I grew up. I'm not trying to hurt any feelings, but that's the reality. You can ask Freddie.
Yes, sir.
Yes?
The struggle I had for a while.
Sergio? Yeah, that's how we feel. Even though you say, all nations in tongue, and we can, God, we still feel that. I think, the first preacher today, what was his name? The Morpheus. I saw him in Harding. They invited me and my brother to go to a party. One of the things he said is segregation started between the blacks and the whites. It started because of them wanting just to separate the way they worship. But it should have never started in the first place. It just started because someone said, hey, it's just. And I think for us, when, like you said, like, why won't we like being counted? They're scared. They're scared to just even go out. There's people, they call me and see, because I'm a chaplain now, and they're like, Pastor, can I go out? Can I go get bread? Can I do this? Can I buy that? Can I do this? And you might say, well, really? It gets to that point. So one of the things that we always say is, especially the experience I have with the church that I am, they're like, let us help you plant this church in the beginning. And we were like something, how do you say it, brother? Like God opened the doors in many ways. We felt the love, but it was kind of like once in a lifetime kind of thing. It felt amazing because, we had, lead worshiper from the American church say, hey, I'm going to devote, 6 months to you. Let's go, And I was like, oh, that's so nice. This is God who doesn't know Spanish, but he knows, Amazing Grace and, and Cuán Grande es Dios and how great is our God. But he invested time. He invested what he knew in us. And that's the way we started to grow. And for us, that's amazing.
Yeah, sorry, feel that way, obviously.
Yeah.
It's not good. I'm curious, how do, in the Hispanic church, this is a basic trend you see in the United States in general, is that, by the third generation, people, they identify less with their country of origin than, the first, the second is probably caught somewhere in between, all those sorts of things. How do you plan long term for that and integration? Because with the American experience, that's just what generally happens. I used to have a German neighbor and she used to lament that the basically 2 generations after her wanted nothing to do with the German society. And I would just tell her, well, they're not German anymore.
Right.
You know, they're American.
So imagine what me as a father, I have a daughter, 16-year-old.
Yeah.
She's a goalie for the Bryan High School team in Arkansas, very good. And she sings in our worship group. She leads the youth. And she's amazing. But one of the things that our third generations, they're fully English. Our kids' classes are English. Youth is English. But we're intentional in doing everything bilingual at all times. So we're teaching the first generation English, but we're also teaching the third generation Spanish. Because we believe it's very important to not forget where we're from and how blessing it is to know Spanish. Now my daughter, she tells me that there's a girl that got to high school from Guatemala, she doesn't know English, I'm helping her. And that's the importance of knowing your culture and knowing so we have to be very intentional. And so just the question that you asked, just imagine that, just on a Hispanic pastor now, he's trying to pastor a church. There's around 10 different cultures, and now you're just not with cultures. You're now dealing with first, second generation Spanish, English, bilingual, and people that just don't know. So we're trying to deal with all that. But whenever an American church steps up to the plate and says, "Hey, pastor, we're going to help you economically. You can use our facilities," that makes our weight so much all right, I can concentrate and focus on what God wants me to do. And that's how I felt last year. I was like, thank you, Lord. Even though we were growing and all that, for our church to step up and say, hey, man, we know the importance of you being good, and we know the importance of the impact that you're having, so much so that we want to absorb this, we want to help you this, but keep going.
Yeah.
We got your back. We're going to pat you in the back because what their understanding is, we might not go to Cuba and all that, but we're using you to impact the Hispanic community.
One of the things that a new planter or a church planter faces is there's so many things, because like in my case, moving to Northwest Arkansas is like the mentality of the Hispanic is like the pastor needs to work. I mean, he can preach and everything, but he needs to have another job. They cannot see those just them preaching and as a job. They don't see it like that. So when I'm seeing over there that says how should we engage with culture? I saw what they turn the screen on the other side, and I've been thinking about what we're talking over here and what they're teaching on the other side, and engaging with the culture that we have, with the Hispanic culture. We have so many nationalities in the same church, and engaging with the culture in one building is difficult. It's very hard, because the mentality of the Hispanic coming to the United States is different. So one of the things that we challenge is like, they're used to receive everything from the United States. When they go to a church, when we were in Mexico, they will come and give us. So when they come here, some of them come with that mentality. What are we going to receive? It's not like, how can we not provide to the building? How can we work for the building? How can we be part of a church and a congregation? So we had to switch that part also to the people that is coming to, and they want to be part of a church, of a congregation. Another thing is, when there's a church planter, we don't have a building. We're having people coming from different cultures. So your mind is everywhere. It's just not on preaching. It's about so many things that you don't have, and you have the idea of what you want, but you don't have the building. And people, starting at my house, it was great for a little bit, but then they were like, we don't have a building, where are we going to go? You know what, I'm just going to go somewhere else. So they start losing that, because the people want to see a place. I don't care if it's small or big, but they want to see a place where they know that you're going to be preaching, and they're going to be calling that home. Because the people that is already here, what I'm facing in Northwest Arkansas is that there's a big Hispanic community that have been to church, but they've been hurt. They don't want to go to church anymore, because the pastor, they have so many different ideas, that they have bad experiences, so they don't want to go to the church anymore. So when you go and plant a church in the United States, it's just not building a church. It's about different ideas that the people have with the Hispanic community.
Thank you all. Our time is up. We are so grateful that you've been here today. We just want to close our time with some prayer. And I love bilingual prayer. I love it when we worship together in two languages. So I'm just going to invite a volunteer to pray in English and a volunteer to pray in Spanish as we close out our time. And let's remember that God loves all people and He wants all people to come to Him. And thank you for your interest today. And we just ask that God would continue to bless this movement.
Thank you for tuning into this episode on the Real Life Theology Podcast. I wanted to inform you guys about an upcoming event in the Indianapolis area, the 2025 Renewed National Gathering themed Facing the Future, Making True Disciples of King Jesus. We would love to see you there. It's happening April 28th and 29th at Mount Gilead Church in Mooresville, Indiana. Hope to see you there.